Hi, my name is Lou Molinaro. I used to be a co-owner of This Ain't Hollywood with Glenn Fallman and Jody Fallman. My responsibility there was to book talent for our stage as well as promoting the room. I'm originally from Oshawa, Ontario and currently living in Hamilton, Ontario. And my new job right now is working at Harris Music Institute as an instructor. What got me into punk rock? I've always been listening to music from when I was a little kid. I used to collect magazines as well as buy records. And I remember in grade school, when I was in grade 7, I used to buy Cream magazines, Circus, Rock Scene. And I noticed the images of musicians looking a little different, from the long kimono and the gowns like Rush and a lot of the prog rockers used to wear. It became more evident that the look was leaning towards short hair and leather jackets. And I found out that this whole music movement was new and they coined it as punk rock. It wasn't until maybe a year later where I think I had the nerve and the guts to go to Star Records, which I used to go to all the time, even before punk started. And I asked one of the guys that worked there what record I should buy, and Mike from Star Records suggested that I buy the Sex Pistols album. And I went into the used section and found an album by an Australian band called Radio Birdman, and I didn't know that they were punk rock, but I just really loved their album cover. It was 6 guys standing in the front and they looked cool, and Mike told me that they too were a punk rock band. So it was truly the combination of Star Records and being an impressionable kid buying magazines and noticing all these really wild looking characters like Johnny Rotten and the Ramones that got me into punk rock. Main influences. On a personal level, I have to say my mom and dad. My mom always in terms of making sure I did the right thing, which often I didn't. My dad gave me the confidence and always told me to be confident on anything I wanted to pursue. Rob Sweeney, who worked at Star Records, always directed me to the right records growing up. He introduced me to a lot of great punk rock, but just a lot of great music in general, and he still does. He definitely influenced me as a person in terms of what I listen to and how it shapes your attitude. And probably my biggest influence was a guy named Gary Top from Toronto, who was part of a promotion team called the Garys. When I was younger, I used to go to a lot of shows in Toronto, and I noticed that the Garys Present were on a lot of these posters, and I thought, who are these 2 cool guys that always put on these great shows? And I was very fortunate to know Gary Top, and I still do. And I would say that he's probably been my biggest personal influence in regards to my directions professionally, as well as shaping my attitude and my confidence in regards to what I do with my involvement in music. Musically, I had to dwindle this down to a group of 12, but I couldn't leave any of these out. So my bands that, or the bands that really influenced me the most were bands like Sparks, The Small Faces, Hawkwind, The Dictators, The Ugly Ducklings, Mott the Hoople, The Rolling Stones, The Kinks, Radio Birdman, The MC5, the Alice Cooper Group, from Pretty's For You album to Muscle of Love, so the original group, and the Blue Oyster Cult. I think those 12 bands probably are the ones that really shaped my attitude in regards to why I love music and why I lean to the music that I love, but they all had this punk ethic connected to them. And even if you think of a band like Hawkwind or the Blue Oyster Cult are more away from the punk attitude, their attitude was very much punk in terms of the music that they sang, or the songs that they sang, the lyrical content. And also they were the band that really connected a lot of the New York punk rockers to that next level of musicianship. So those are the people that really influenced me the most. Okay, my first concert, this is kind of embarrassing. It was 1974. Oshawa celebrated their 50th anniversary legitimately as a city. I'm originally from Oshawa. So there's a park downtown, a smaller version of Gage Park called Memorial Park. And in the evening of this long week of festivities celebrating Oshawa's 50th anniversary, the featured show was a free show at Memorial Park with a band called Wednesday. They were AM darlings that covered a lot of old songs like Teen Angel and Last Kiss, but they were also a band from Oshawa, and they just released their first album. So it was hugely attended, it was free, and I rode my bike. I didn't live very far from the park. I got permission from my mom and dad to go with some friends. We rode our bikes to Memorial Park, and I stayed at the very, very back because I was a bit intimidated by this large crowd of people. And I was fascinated by the crowd. I was fascinated by the mannerisms of the crowd, or of the bands talking to, or the band members talking to the crowds, the in-between song banters, and it just really, really hit me because I was such an impressionable kid. So that was my very first official show that I saw. This band later went on and put out a few more big AM hits, but the more I started getting into music, the less I started listening to them because I was exploring a lot more. And I realized that I really wasn't so much a fan of their music, but more about the whole experience of going to a concert. As for my very first punk rock concert, June 2nd, 1980, Ontario Place, the Teenage Head Riot. It just happened to be that that was the one that started it all for me. 1980 was a pretty spectacular year for me and the evolution of music and seeing shows. But I'm sure I'll talk about that Teenage Head Riot a little bit more a little later on in this Q&A, but definitely Ontario Place, June 2nd, 1980, Teenage Head playing the stage that did this circular thing. It was called the Ontario Place Forum, and it blew me away, and it was so profound, and it couldn't have happened with a better band. So yeah, that was my first my first punk rock show with Teenage Head. There's a lot of favorite shows. I'll just list a few of them that come to my mind right now. The Kinks at Maple Leaf Gardens were spectacular. The Dictators in Toronto, various shows at the Horseshoe were great. The Blue Oyster Cult, Motorhead, many years ago when Fast Eddie was still in the band, were fantastic. Teenage Head at the Ontario Place Forum, the Forgotten Rebels a few times that played stellar shows. David Bowie in '83 with Mick Ronson on stage as a special guest was fantastic. Ian Hunter with Mick Ronson. But, you know, thinking of all the shows that really had an impact on me as a fan was Johnny Winters playing twice at the St. Hollywood. Johnny is my Jimi Hendrix, so he's definitely my favorite guitar player. So being able to host two shows with Johnny Winter selfishly meant a lot to me, but it was just incredible seeing this guy who's played humongous stadiums, and once you collect all his records and you have an opportunity to sit and chat with him prior to the show because he's playing your venue, then you see him on your stage. It's a really surreal experience. It's hard to explain. It kind of just connects all the dots as to why you were ever a fan to begin with, because when you wish for something, you sometimes get it, and if you really want it for the right reasons, even more. And Johnny Winter was that. He was just so fantastic both times that when we brought him in the first time in 2010, he wasn't doing very well. He could barely walk. He needed to be assisted up on stage. And then 4 years later, he went through some sort of therapy and rehab, and all of a sudden he regained a lot of his muscles and was able to walk on his own, and it was like night and day difference. But it's just the fact of seeing a living legend play in such a small place like this in Hollywood that really made it such a stellar experience. So I think he's the one that takes the cake. Oh shit, I forgot to mention the Ramones as well. Saw them a bunch of times, but the show that really stands out was when they did the local live tour and they sped everything up so fast, and I was just completely in awe on how all these Ramones classics were done 10 times faster, but they just muscled through a million songs in about 90 minutes. It was incredible. I was standing next to Maria Del Mar from National Velvet at the Purple Onion in Oshawa, Ontario during that tour, and during the day the Ramones went to Star Records in Oshawa to do a meet and greet, and I think all of us were expecting the Ramones just to put on a Ramones show, but they came out as a hardcore, ferocious monster. They were incredible, and I just couldn't believe how fast they played and how Marky just kept that meter consistent the whole time. And Maria, who's next to me, was blown away as well. We were just kind of looking at each other the whole time and just in awe of how great the Ramones were that night. So yeah, that one to add as well. All right, this is a funny story. As I mentioned earlier, I was really influenced by the Garys because they did a bunch of great shows, and I started going to shows in Toronto. So I wanted to have Teenage Head play our high school in Oshawa, and I ran for student council because my agenda was, if I win and I'm elected student council president, then I can bring Teenage Head to our high school. So I actually put a campaign on. I had some friends that helped me, and I ran and won the campaign because my biggest platform was, if you vote for me, we'll get Teenage Head to play this school. So Teenage Head was a really popular school at my, Teenage Head was a very popular band at my high school. So I won it, and then the following day after I won, the teacher that overlooked student council and my vice principal met with me and said, by the way, there's no hope in hell that Teenage Head's ever going to play this school, because they knew of the riot that happened the year before at Ontario Place. So I felt that there was an obligation that I owed the students, that we had to put a show on, and I really fought hard because I was kind of, trying to explain to them that Teenage Head was not the cause of the riot. It was the fact that it was a bunch of crazy fans that wanted to go to the show. It wasn't run properly through Ontario Place the way they promoted it. But nevertheless, they didn't want to take a chance. So we settled on having Gatto play our high school for 1981. So the first show that I ever promoted was Gatto at Central Collegiate in 1981. So that was 40 years ago. 40 years later, it's been quite the ride, but it started with the intention of getting Teenage Head, and my second band of choice, had Teenage Head not been available, was the Forgotten Rebels. And Mr. Chappell, may he rest in peace, who was a really cool he was a great teacher and a cool teacher, and he knew his music. He was the one who told me there's no way that a band who's got a song called Fuck Me Dead is going to be playing at the school either. So forget it, it's not going to happen. So that was my plan A and plan B. So plan C was getting Gatto, because that was about the only band that the school would allow us having. So that's where it all began. In addition to, my first high school show, when I went to Carleton University, I became an arts rep and tried to weasel my way into getting into helping this guy named Peter Wheatley, who put on shows at Carleton University, and help him promote the shows there. And that introduced me to different people in Ottawa, where I started doing club shows at places like Zaphod, Beeblebrox, a couple at Barrymore's, and this would have been 86, 87, 88. I moved back to Oshawa around 1990 and started doing select shows independently. Bands like the Chesterfield Kings, the Cynics, a lot of garage bands that were kind of reintroducing a lot of the 60s garage music. And then I took a bit of a break, and then life had me moving to Hamilton in around 95, 96. And then it wasn't until about 97, 98 that I started getting back into doing shows. And I was doing one-offs at the Corktown. And then that led me into meeting Brody, who was doing shows at the Raven. I did a few shows there. The Raven closed. The Underground opened. I did various shows independently, as well as a couple in association with Brody at the Underground. Then I got offered the position to manage the Corktown from about 2001 to late 2006. So that was that chapter. And then the people that bought the Corktown at the time definitely went, you know, their whole ideology of what they wanted on that stage was very different than mine. And I remember Glenn Fallman in particular was really worried because he was going to lose his favorite bar. And, you know, I told him, assuring him that, you know, punk would still happen there and rock and roll, because they told me that we couldn't do all the shows that we used to host there before, but variety would still be a thing. And then they completely pulled a 180 and pulled the plug on a lot of rock and roll and punk shows there. So I left the Corktown in November of 2006. And then late 2007, Glenn had this idea of opening up a bar, and I was still burnt out and I wasn't ready, but he still pursued it. He had a vision, and you know, he's a bit of a visionary. A lot of people don't know this about Glenn, but when Glenn's stuck on something, he's like a dog tugging at your pant leg, and he still kept at it. I was living in Oshawa at the time because my mom had just passed away, and I was taking care of my dad, and he told me that he found this great place that was up for sale at the corner of James and Murray. So I came up, took a look at it, really liked it, and I was kind of looking forward to working with Glenn and Jody as well, because I knew that their hearts were in it for the right reasons. And then we opened up the St. Hollywood. So from a high school gig to 2021, it was 40 years of doing shows. And it's been, you know, quite an interesting trip. And I'm still going to be doing shows, even though the St. Hollywood is no longer. But I'm looking forward to doing shows independently, working with other promoters in the city as well. So the silver medal goes to a Max Webster show for one of the craziest things that had happened. A bunch of us went to the Oshawa Civic Auditorium. I think this would have been 1979. And we all met at a park to drink whatever booze we can grab. And then we went to the Oshawa Civic Auditorium to see Max Webster. One of the guys that we knew from school was under the influence of something. And we knew that just by his demeanor, he was a little different than the rest of us for that evening. So we were on the floor, and it was a pretty busy show. He crossed the barrier that's the separation from the stage to the crowd, and then all of a sudden he got up on the crowd, or he got up from the crowd onto the stage, and he put his hands up. He was rocking, and all of a sudden there was like some stage security, as well as I think some guys that worked for Max Webster, some techs, some roadies that started chasing him on the stage. So he went behind the tower of the mains on one side of the stage. So if we're looking at the stage, I still remember this, folks. It would be to my stage right. He went behind the stage towers of the main speakers, and he fucking pushed all these speakers off, and all these humongous speakers started landing all over the place. So there's a few people that got injured, and we were a little to the center of it, but had we been where we were initially during the opening band, we would have got hit with these speakers as well. So I think the show was in 1979, and I think it was a Saturday night, and we all went to school on the Monday, but we didn't see this one guy that did it till probably 3 or 4 days afterwards, because they kept him in jail or kept him locked up, because I think he was so high it took him 2 days to come down before he could actually make sense of what happened. So that's the silver medal story. The gold goes to the Teenage Head Ontario Place show. So I want to kind of set this up. It happened on a Monday. There was a few of us from high school that were big Teenage Head fans, and we decided that we were going to take the Monday off school. We were going to go early because Ontario Place had two policies of getting into a show. You pay for park admission and buy a ticket to the show, or you pay for park admission and that allows you to get into the show for free. So they did the latter for the Teenage Head show because the people that were hosting the show had no idea that Teenage Head was so popular at the time. Frantic City was #1 in Canada, and they were the in thing. There was such an excitement about Teenage Head. So we decided that we were going to skip school, we were going to spend time in Ontario Place, and then once the forum was going to open, we were going to go in there early to get our seats. We were 15 years old, this is 1980, and as the crowd started coming in, we started moving back because we were so intimidated. We thought, okay, there was something really weird. And I also want to add, earlier during the day, the contrast was, because it's like a family park, there's mothers that are pushing their kids in strollers, and then all of a sudden you get to see all these people in leather jackets and punk rockers. So the mix of the two worlds clash, and I just kind of felt something instinctively, and I've told Gord this a bunch of times. I knew something was going to happen. I wasn't entirely sure that it was going to be a riot, but I knew that something was going to happen. It just seemed the contrast of the two lifestyles were not going to be suitable for that day. So the Ontario Place forum opened up, and we finally, once we settled, we were right at the very, very back, and I started noticing how these people just filled all the seats, and the place was packed, and they had a rotating stage at the time at the forum. Bob Segarini's band opened up, and then Teenage Head hit the stage, and the crowd went wild. So what we didn't know was that there's a bunch of people that were on the outside trying to get in, and people were pushing fences down. Securities and cops were starting to make their way out to the park. And all this was very new to us because we've never been in one of those situations before, or a concert that was so intense. So once the show ended, and it did end, the band got through their whole set. Once we left the park, once we left the forum, as we were walking through the park, it just turned into this humongous riot. People are breaking things, fireworks, and police all over the place, grabbing people, arresting them. And they shut down the subway lines because people were going crazy on the streets outside of Lakeshore. In order to get your subway line at Exhibition, you couldn't. So we were from Oshawa, and we were hoping to get our last GO train going back to Oshawa, which left at 12:13. We missed that last train, so we had to camp out with a bunch of other people that were at the park watching Teenage Head till the next train, which was 6:13 the following morning on Tuesday a.m. So the wildest thing was everybody standing outside of Ontario Place being monitored by police officers to make sure that everything was going to be, ruly and safe, because they knew everything that happened at the riot the night before. So by far, that's the craziest thing I've ever witnessed. And being 15 years old and just being in awe of this band and realizing that this is the riot that broke out, that made national headlines. When I got home, my mom called in sick for work, or she said she was going to be late because she knew that I went to this show and I didn't make it home. When she was listening to the radio and listening to the news, she had heard that there was this big riot that happened at Ontario Place, and she was scared. She thought, oh my God, something happened to my son. He didn't come home last night. So when I got home, it was kind of, she was happy that I got home, but I got in a lot of shit for going there. And that was one of those things where I think kind of concerned her about my choices in life, because she was like, if this is the way it's going to be with the music that you like, eventually you're going to get in trouble. So luckily nothing happened to us, but it was an experience that will always, be a profound experience in my life. And it was a really, really incredible summer, because about 6 weeks later, I saw the Forgotten Rebels play with DOA at the Oshawa Italian Club, and it was put on by Star Records in Oshawa. And it was the first time I saw Mickey, Chris Houston. It was the lineup. It was the sort of, stellar lineup that everybody loves about the Rebels, the In Love with the System lineup. And I was familiar with DOA, and we were allowed to see the show if we were underage, but we had to stay in the lobby, because if you went through the doors, you had to be 19 plus. But as long as you stayed in the lobby, you could watch the show. And I had to go to the washroom before the bands actually started playing. And this Italian club in Oshawa did not have private washrooms for band members, so the band had to use the same washrooms as the public. And at one point I just kind of glanced over, and I saw this real sort of greasy, dirty guy next to me, and it was Joey Shithead that was taking a piss next to me. And I was really, again, intimidated, but at the same point I was in awe, because I had seen all sorts of footage on the new music about DOA, and I think their EP just came out. And sometimes people appear larger than life, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy's just like a regular Oshawa dude. Had I not known it was Joey Shithead, he looked like a guy that probably worked at GM as a summer student. So that's the craziest show that that I ever attended. The things that I loved most about the St. Hollywood was how people that were music fans of different genres created their own community through the bar. So if you'd listened to noise, you found other people that listened to noise. If you're a hardcore fan, you met other people. And age was no restriction in regards to if you're a 19-year-old kid watching a hardcore band, or if you're a 50-year-old guy. There's like some sort of chemistry that just naturally connects people together. I also love the fact that I gave an opportunity to a lot of music fans to see some of their favorite shows that they often talk about. Again, genre specific, no way. It's whether you listen to funk, whether you listen to punk, whether you listen to metal. We were just kind of an open door in regards to all the musical varieties, and that was something that I was really proud of, as well as Glenn and Jody. I'm also very, very thankful of having the opportunity of working with Glenn and Jody. Doing this kind of work, you have to really trust the people, because it's a bar. There's all sorts of opportunities of people finding ways, of not being honest. And luckily for me, I had two honest people that really were a strong foundation for, especially someone like myself as a music fan, to host a lot of shows. There's many shows that really worried Glenn and Jody financially, because they weren't familiar with these acts, or just the cost of it. And that was one of the things that was really difficult about owning a bar and buying talent, is that it's an expensive endeavor. But luckily for us, we got out of it okay. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact of Glenn and Jody just give me the green light on a lot of these shows that we hosted. The staff is the same thing. It's very hard to find a staff that's honest and reliable, and I think we had the best staff. Whether it's Jim the cleaner, or whether it's Becky late at night who closes the bar, we just had so much trust that we never worried that there was things being stolen or any sort of negative things happening. Luckily for us, for 11 years, we didn't have to worry about that. The things that I dislike, on an industry basis, it's difficult and really expensive to run a live music venue. Liability insurance is a fucking headache. I think insurance companies gouge at us because they still see rock shows as being the dangerous thing. And when you really look at our 11 years, or when you look at any venue here in the city, that's not where the problems happen. The problems happen in other bars, but yet they still have this, their mindset is stuck on the fact that live music and rock shows and punk shows are the ones that cause all the problems. So I dislike the fact that the industry never gave us a fair shake, at least to give us a proper deal when it comes to expenses, especially with insurance. Our liability costs were super expensive. So I kind of, want to say fuck you to the insurance companies that always gouged us. And the other thing is that owning a bar is like having a child that never grows up. You're always looking on your phone, even if you're not there, making sure that everything's okay. If something goes wrong, it prioritizes your life. And what a lot of people don't realize is that when you own a bar, it really becomes the most important thing in your life. And it jeopardizes your relationships with friends or partners that you're with. And it really becomes the most important thing. If there's a problem, you have to go to it. If Glenn and Jody are busy, then I'm there, and vice versa. So it's really hard to break away because we were open 7 days a week. And I think Glenn and Jody would probably agree that, as much as we'd like to think that we also had a life, it's hard to have a life when you own a bar. And it's hard to have ownership of your life again when you're worried about a band that's stuck at a border that can't get through. And there's 200 tickets that have been sold, and how do you explain to 200 people that you can't see the show tonight because of a problem that happened? Like, there's just so many things that are stuck sort of in the infrastructure of this industry that really makes it hard to overlook, and it really dictates your life. So that's the one thing that I disliked the most about this in Hollywood. And it's just, again, it's not so much about the bar, it's just the layout of what this business is all about that makes it really hard to live your life properly, because it really does prioritize, that becomes the number one thing in your life, whether you believe it or not. All right, so this is one of them. It's like kind of magic. But the gold medal useless talent that I have, and I'm not going to do it right now. You have to prime me up, and it has to be the right environment, but I'm a real shitty dancer. And when I dance, I think of people in my mind and I try to impersonate their mannerisms. So I have the Greg Briscoe dance, and I have the Glenn Fallman dance. So a lot of the times when I'm dancing, I really don't have dance steps. So I have to think of people that I like, and I try to impersonate them while I'm dancing to a beat. So if you're ever at a dance club with me, ask me to dance and you'll know what I mean. I'm pretty adventurous when it comes to food and alcohol. I really like a lot of Asian food, Thai food. I've been eating a lot of it lately. It's just healthy for you. But I always seem to enjoy Italian food the most, mainly because the smell of Italian food always reminds me of my mom's cooking, and it's kind of like a very warm feeling for me. And it's obviously delicious, but it brings back a lot of memories of home cooked meals with my mom and dad and family. So, Italian food would probably be my favorite. However, I've been known to enjoying Taco Bell with my buddies late at night when I'm drunk.